Boom. Yeah, absolutely. Get in there into the camera.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure for me to introduce Eric Von Tasso. He has appointments for both the dance and the theater departments, and he supports them with lighting, sound, and production management. We're proud to say that Eric is a graduate of Hope, 2006. I'm also proud to say that he has his MFA from the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign, which is where I got my PhD. That's why I'm so proud of it. He's worked with several professional theaters and received honors and awards. He's also directed plays. Before most of you came, I was discussing one play which is called The Klingon Christmas Carol. I'm a Trekkie from way back, and I was pleased to read that. Eric describes himself as an avid collector of comic books, a longtime Detroit Red Wings fan, and as someone who listens to more podcasts than you want to hear about. So I'm sure that we're in for a very informational and well-presented first class of three. Thank you.
All right. So, thank you, Bill. Hi, everybody. As Bill said, my name is Eric Van Tassel. I'm a professor of lighting and sound for both the dance and theater departments here at Hope. Since I'm doing 3 full sessions with y'all, I felt like it made sense to spend a little bit of this first session just on who I am. Because we're going to spend relatively so much time together, and so rather than just diving right into the content, let's talk a little bit. First, a little bit about my. Oh, hang on. Why are we not fully presenting now? Please do the thing. Oh, let's minimize this. I'm a professor of this stuff. You'd think it would all work, which is why it all did a moment ago. And now just goes to show that anyone can have issues. All right, cool. Let's close this completely. Great. Now let's reopen. You're experiencing a little bit of what students have gotten to experience in the last 2 years with professors that have a varying level of familiarity and comfortability with technology. And that is regardless of age. So here we go. So as I mentioned, we're going to be doing 3 sessions here, and these are what these 3 sessions will be. Oh, my camera here is fuzzy. Sorry, folks online, I'm all fuzzy. Trust me, I look amazing. I'm not normally just a fuzzy blob. But here's what where we're headed. So today we're going to talk about behind the scenes at Hope College Theater. And with that, we'll talk about some things that are applicable to sort of all theater spaces you walk into. The idea being here that whatever you see at a theater, wherever you might see it, you get to have a sense of what might be happening behind the scenes, and ability to envision some of that. And then next time I'm here, which is next week, we'll be doing from the page to the stage. How do we take a script and pick that? First, how do we choose a script? Secondly, how do we, and once we've chosen that script, how do we get that from a document in front of us to a bunch of people prancing around on stage, making you feel things? And so we've got a lot of steps in between. And then the last session that we'll do in 2 weeks will be Let There Be Light, which will be primarily focused on the lighting design process, my specific part of my specific expertise. I'm a professor of both lighting and sound, but I have more training and experience in lighting. Though I would like to fancy myself a pretty good sound designer as well. But first, before we dive into all that, like I said, let's take a little bit of time to tell you who I am. Unfortunately, I don't think it's practical for us to go around and for me to learn everything about you. But please, I want this to be interactive, so we'll get into that in a minute. So I attended Hope College. As Bill mentioned, I graduated in 2006. While I was a student at Hope, I came in as an actor. You can see this is me, this little short fellow back here with the goofy face, which right there. That's from, I believe, Candide, or no, excuse me, from Carousel my freshman year. I believe this is from sophomore year when we did King Lear. That's me with my sister. So I used to have the long hair. Basically, when I was in college, I figured out that the theater department would cut your hair so that you would fit whatever the time period was. So I didn't pay for a haircut until I was a senior and stopped doing quite so much performance. And I was also in 12th Street Harmony, the a cappella group on campus, the men's a cappella group, excuse me. That's us singing the national anthem, I believe, at a Hope Calvin game, perhaps. I also was never a huge basketball fan, but the Hope Calvin rivalry is a fun time, yeah. But rather than standing in line for basketball tickets, one of the guys in the a cappella group figured out that the coach loved us. And so he would, at the beginning of the year, go and say, hey, can we sing the national anthem at the Hope Calvin games anytime they come to town? And we would do that. And so I never had to worry about a ticket. I just came, sang my little song, and then watched some basketball. It was a good time. I was also in chapel choir. That's me on the end down here. I think this is, let's see here, who's in this photo? I think that's sophomore year. But yeah, so I spent my time at Hope. I came into Hope College, as so many theater students do, as an actor. Our theater program is a BA program, Bachelor of Arts, rather than a BFA, Bachelor of Fine Arts. A BA program allows you to have a little bit more range of what you want to study. If somebody's focused on a BFA program, they come in as an actor, they're an actor, they have to take some introductory technical courses, but they're not going to do as in-depth with any of that. They're going to focus more specifically just on acting. For some students, that's great. But I actually think that, especially in a liberal arts context, a BA program like Hope's can be such a wonderful thing because it allows students to explore other areas and learn and discover other passions. It's a lot to ask a student who is 18 years old to make a choice that will impact their entire life. Boy, wouldn't it be nice to give them a little flexibility, at least till they're 20. So that's where I think a BA program can be really wonderful. So while I was a student at Hope, though I came in as an actor, I joined Light Crew because they would pay me. I could get paid to work in the building that I already liked doing stuff with people I already liked working with, doing things that I didn't know anything about, but I could learn. And so I started working on Light Crew and started getting paid to do that. And that was pretty fun. And I also took directing classes and realized that as much as I enjoyed performance, and especially enjoyed vocal performance, as seen here, I thought about theater in a storytelling way that was more big picture, like a director or designer, than character focused on one individual, like an actor might need to be. And so I started directing and designing lights. And when I graduated from Hope, this is me here with Professor Michelle Bombi, who is now our department chair of the theater department. I'm over on the far side over there with my roommate's senior year, a few pounds lighter and much more tan. And then in the middle there, I'm focusing a light there. I'm standing and asking somebody else to aim a light at me from above there. So this, when I realized that I was graduating, I figured out, okay, I'm a director who designs lights. I'm good at designing lights, but I think of myself as a director. And I moved to Chicago. And the problem with being a director who designed lights was I didn't know how to get directing jobs, but without starting my own theater company, which I wasn't interested in doing. But I was able to get lighting work. I knew how to get that job. And I figured this will work. This will get people to trust me. And then they'll let me, because they'll recognize that I'm a good person to have in the room. And then they'll let me direct. And that worked. You can see in this bottom left-hand corner down here, this is the aforementioned A Klingon Christmas Carol. This is me giving a pre-show curtain speech on opening night of a production of that I directed. But around that time, where I was getting these directing opportunities, I was also realizing, but I really like lighting now. I've been doing this for so many years. What if I'm not a director who designed lights? What if I'm a lighting designer who occasionally directs? And that was, anytime you change your own self-image, that's tricky. And it took me sort of 2 years of like rejiggering how I thought about myself. And then decided, okay, yes, that's definitely the situation. These are some photos just from various productions and companies I worked with, including, this is Steppenwolf Theater Company. I worked not doing artistic work for them, but doing fundraising, doing corporate relations. And we had the Steppenwolf softball team. So that's me here in the hat. I should do this on here so that folks at home can see. This is me here in the back row. Theater league softball is a lot of fun in Chicago. We play 16-inch softball, which is like the really big, slightly squishier ball that is basically only played in Chicago and Portland these days. But a lot of cool people have played Chicago 16-inch softball, including, I think there's photos of, well, Gary Sinise for sure. He played on this team, and yeah, Bill recognizes it. I think Hillary Clinton used to play some 16-inch softball. So yeah, it's a good bunch. Anyhow, so after figuring out that I was a lighting designer who directed when given an opportunity, throughout all that time, I'd had a day job. I'd had a few different day jobs, including working at Steppenwolf, a thing that paid me and gave me health insurance so that I could do lighting design in my free time. And so my question for myself was, how do I stop having a day job? How do I get to do this full time? A friend of mine, when I was pondering this, said to me, right now you have two jobs. You have your Bruce Wayne job and you have your Batman job. You want to be Batman full time. I said, yes, I do want to be Batman full time. How do I do that? And for me, the answer was graduate school. It's not necessary for everybody, but it was the answer for me, partially because I knew that someday I would love to get to teach someplace. So I think it's very appropriate that the Hope College logo and the University of Illinois logos look very comfortable together, very orange and blue. It's a good look. All good back there? Oh yeah, sure. It's so weird. Honestly, so here's the thing. I was in a classroom the other day. We had professional development on campus, a couple of instructors asked, "Are you okay with me removing my mask?" And nobody sort of reacted, so they did. And I thought, well, that's weird, because I was in the audience and I thought, there's a strange power dynamic where the person in charge asks you if you are collectively comfortable for me to do a thing, and then they just do it. So I didn't like that. So I'm going to leave mine on. If that's okay with you. I've been teaching with a mask on for 2 years. I'm comfortable with it. So if you're okay, I'm okay. But yeah, that's very, very kind for giving us that option. So University of Illinois and Hope College have the same colors, and I always think that that's kind of funny. And also, it's a very friendly hello, HI. Hi, hello. So this is me getting my my hood that I'd earned as a Master's of Fine Arts. I don't know if anybody else gets excited about this, but I really like the regalia of graduation and commencement and convocation in the fall, all these things. I love all the colors. The color of a person's robe is indicative of where they went to school. Just the standard black is perfectly all right, and some schools don't have colors. But since I knew that someday I wanted to teach, I actually bought my University of Illinois robe because I thought it looks good. And I'm proud of the fact that I went to University of Illinois. Also, it has a little bit of orange trim around the sort of collar there. I like that. And frankly, the hood color is the color that determines what or indicates your field of study. And so the fine arts, including theater, it is brown. And the brown hood with the black suit, I think, just doesn't look great. So I'm really glad that I have the blue. I think it's a much more power suit kind of look. You can also tell, this is just geeking out here. If you've got the three little lines on the sleeve, that's a PhD. If you've got the long sort of wizard sleeves seen here that sort of hang down, that's an MFA. In the world of theater, Masters of Fine Arts and a PhD are both considered terminal degrees. They are both the top of their field. There is not a one is higher than the other. It is more so a emphasis on what was studied while you were a student. Masters of Fine Arts, an MFA in theater, is more applied work, whereas a doctorate in theater, a PhD in theater, is more history-based typically. So Dinah Robbins, who is part of the theater faculty, she is and teaches 2 of our theater history classes and is a director. She has her doctorate. And so she could be referred to as Dr. Robbins. Referring to me as doctor would be inappropriate and wrong and flattering, but really sort of a lateral move for me. So I'm not even that flattered by it. So after University of Illinois, or actually while I was at U of I actually reconnected with Hope College a little bit. I worked a couple of summers with Hope Summer Repertory Theater. I was production manager. And while I was production managing for 2 summers, I designed the lights for 1 show each of those 2 years. Those first 2 years, I did Driving Miss Daisy down here and an Iliad, if you happen to see either of those things. The following summer, in the summer of 2019, I came back to town, not as production manager, but was just to design lights on 1 production of The Old Man and the Old Moon. Had some really fun with those, a lot of fun with those productions. After graduating from U of I spent a year in the Villages, Florida. Anybody in this room heard of the Villages? It's the largest retirement community in the world. It's 120,000 retirees. And it's in some ways magical and really cool. There's it's 120,000 retired, super active people who do stuff like this and want to learn, want to party, want to see shows, want to do things. It's great. And so there is a 1,000-seat touring house theater there that hosts multiple Broadway shows a year, a bunch of classic rock, oldies, new things, dance, lots of stuff. So these are some photos from a couple of things there, and also their smaller space. So I was the resident lighting director and lighting designer at that space. But while I was there, I was only there for a year, actually 11 months. I missed the hottest month of the year in Florida because a position opened up back here at Hope. And I had always said I'd like to be teaching someplace similar to where I went to school. And that's a tenure track position. So it was only going to come up once while I was a student or while I was in the workforce, probably. So I said, I gotta at least try, and we got it. So we had a very busy summer in the summer of 2019. We moved. This is our house in Florida. This is my wife, Katie, and I. We moved across the country, back up here. Lived in student housing for the summer, which is where the employees of Hope Summer Repertory Theater lived during the summer. While we were living in student housing, we welcomed the birth of our first child. This is our son, Grayson. And then about a month later, we bought our first house. And then about a week after that, or 2 weeks after that, I started my first semester of teaching full time here at Hope. So summer of 2019, everybody's lives changed in early 2020, but my life did a fair amount of changing in the summer of 2019 as well. And so since then, this is just from this last Christmas. We like it here. We're happy. It's good. So this is me and my wife, Katie, and our son, Grayson. He's pretty great. There he is without a mask. He's a cute little guy. If you're interested in seeing more of my work, you can go on ebtlights.com. That's my website. It's a little bit out of date. It actually has lots of stuff until the last 2 years, and then I've been pretty busy. And also haven't been looking for a job, so it's been less important to keep that up to date. On Instagram, if you happen to be on Instagram or on Facebook, on Instagram, I'm at Lego Eric. On Facebook, you can find me just by my name. And you can follow me without being friends with me. And the reason you might want to do that is because I have at Lego Eric on Instagram. This is a Lego version of me. I carry him in my pocket at all times. It's a way to not take selfies all the time, but still like get a cool documentation of what I've been doing with my life and career. So now you all get to be a part of Lego Eric. Everybody wave. Very nice. Excellent. I'll work on posting that later when I don't have to bother all of you with it. I have a lot of fun with this. And it also is in this top center image, it's how we announced that we are having a second child in May. So that's me. That's just a brief little introduction. So now let's get into the meat of the topic at hand. So we are, this can come on over here. Ta-da. Okay, so rather than having y'all follow me around a theater for an hour, I took some video. What I'd love to do is we're just going to go through this, and as we go, I'm going to open the chat here on my other screen. Folks online, if you've got questions that pop up, we don't need to wait till the end. You can either just drop them into the chat, or if the video's paused, you can raise your hand or just unmute online and go ahead and ask a question. That's fine. I've been doing this online hybrid thing for a little while now. I'm pretty comfortable with it. And what we'll do, like I say, there's sort of some natural stopping places here that I'll definitely pause at. But if there's a thing that you're particularly curious about in the moment, raise your hand. That's okay. Maybe I'll mention it in the video, but if not, that's what I'm here for. Virtual me didn't know your questions. Real me can hear your questions. So we'll go through this. We're going to go through sort of the whole space. We're going to be focused primarily on the DeWitt main theater, but we also sort of visit backstage and our studio space and a lot of different things. There's about 40 minutes, 44 minutes of video. We've got an hour and 10 minutes left in the class. So we've got plenty of time to like stop and start and talk through some things. And also, if we don't get through it all, that's okay. I got 3 sessions. We could wrap them up the next time. Yeah, well, it's the luxury of time. Yeah. All right. So question. Yeah.
You seem excited about choosing lighting and sound to work with. What excitement is there to lighting manager?
Yeah. What it was, so the question was for those online, question was why get excited about lighting? Yeah, and I think that is that's an astute question. It's funny because I think that there are, to think about it on a broad scale, I would imagine if we went around the room and asked everybody their job or what they had a career or what they're currently passionate about as a hobby or anything, there would be multiple things in this room that I would have no idea even existed as a career, right? Or as a hobby or as an interest. And I would be curious about those things, but also like, how did you even find that, right? That's part of the beauty of humanity, I think, is that we all sort of find other things. I sort of stumbled into lighting on some level, just to sort of, because it was a way to get paid to hang out with people I liked. But what I like about lighting is that it is one of many fields where logic and art meet. Yeah. Yes, I want to create a beautiful stage picture, or I want to make an audience feel a certain thing, or I want to help tell this story. Ultimately, that's the most simple way to put it. Whatever the story is we're telling, whether it being a dance piece with no dialogue or a theater piece that's all dialogue, I want to help tell that story. But how do I do that? Some of it is just math and science. It's nuts and bolts. It's, if I put this light here, what will that look like and how will that impact the audience? Or if I want to put this light here because I think it'll look great, but I can't because there's a air duct in the way, where can I put it instead that will have that same impact? There's a problem solving nature to it that I find really fascinating. But also, I think one of the things that's magical about lighting is that, and we'll talk about this a little bit more in session 3, is that your average viewer maybe doesn't notice the lighting probably 90% of the time, but it's impacting you. And you do notice it when it's bad. There's an old joke. It's a little comic strip, and it shows a lighting designer and a sound designer. And one of them says, "Oh, the reviews are out." And he grabs the newspaper and he says, "What does it say?" And the other guy says, "Costumes, set, director, performances, or whatever." It's da, 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 da. And the other guy says, "Anything about lighting or sound?" And he says, "No." And then they give each other a big high five and they say, "We didn't do anything wrong." You notice when it's bad. I'd like to think that there are times you notice it when it's good, but there's some pieces, some theater pieces or dance pieces where actually, if you notice it when it's good, I've distracted from the story, and so I don't want you to notice it. Yeah, does that answer your question? We'll definitely go into it in more detail on the third session. So, but yeah, that's a great question. Very good. All right. So, any other questions before we get started? Let's rock and roll. Here we go. Like I say, we'll do a lot of stop and start here. So we've titled this class "A View from the Balcony," and I thought it was then appropriate for us to start our tour in the balcony. So here we are in the balcony. You can see that as we look out onto the stage, you're seeing this space in a way that you probably have never seen it before, in that it is not ready for a show of any kind. The DeWitt Main Theater gets a lot of use throughout the year. We do 4 main stage shows for the theater department, and typically at least 2 of those, usually 3, are in this space. Additionally, the dance department does 1 show in this space in February or March, and Hope Summer Repertory Theater uses this space in the summer as well. Additionally, occasionally there's various smaller addresses, readings, guest things. Earlier this year, there was a TEDx presentation in here, which you can actually see some of the signage there up at the back of the space. So one thing this is a good camera angle to take a look at the seating arrangement in DeWitt. DeWitt Theater is a relatively unique space. I don't see many spaces like this. It's called a multiform theater. What we mean by that is we can have multiple arrangements of our seating to adapt to different staging configurations that we would like. The seating banks that you see here on this side and over here as well, these 2 sets of seats, we call them our orchestra seats. At the moment, they are arranged for a thrust configuration, meaning that there's audience on 3 sides. Those 2 banks plus the one that I'm in, where the balcony is, and the seats below us. A thrust configuration can be great with our audience here at center, with audience on 3, or with our performers here at center with audience on 3 sides. This can be a really lovely configuration. We like this for a lot of reasons. But the other sort of traditional, most traditional theatrical arrangement is proscenium. Proscenium arrangement is where you have all of your audience on one side facing one portal into a performance space. So there's your proscenium arch, and then having an audience down here. You've probably seen this space in both of those configurations if you've attended the theater at Hope very often. During the summer theater, we're always in the thrust, and that has to do with the amount of storage we have backstage. But to do the proscenium configuration, all we do is you can see that this whole structure is 1 unit. And it's the same thing on the other side. And what we do is those 2 units swivel into place here and here. And you can see that this whole structure is 1 unit as well. That whole structure is a lift. And that lift can sink down so that the back row of the top stair of those seats, that top stair is even with the tile floor here. That allows us to then have audience in what we would consider orchestra seating, meaning the seats that are in the front section closest to the stage, sunk down just a little bit. So that we don't end up with these big, giant, empty spaces on either side. You can see back here there are these cork panels, as my hand gives off a big reflection. You can see those cork panels in the background there. Those cork panels can get pulled out and then sort of establish a sort of semi-wall here that just directs your focus down to the stage as into a performance space, as opposed to allowing both your sight and also the sound to travel out to the walls like that. Very good. We'll take a pause here, and then I'll continue walking through the balcony a little bit. I'll pause there for just a moment. All that makes sense so far? Yeah.
Fascinating that when you sit in there and watch the play, you're not aware that you've been,
Yeah.
manipulated.
Yeah, absolutely. This is a good time to ask this question. I meant to ask this earlier. Ooh, what's up? Yeah, absolutely. Oh, sure. I can repeat it. I've been doing a good job of that previously. I forgot to do it that time. Sorry. So the question was, or it was more of a comment really, was that it's sort of fascinating to be to not realize that you've been focused and manipulated and shuttled into a smaller space when you come to see a show. I meant to ask this before we got started. So show of hands or people online, if you want to drop into the chat, like me, yes. How many of you have seen shows at Hope Theater at some point? Yeah. Yeah, that doesn't surprise me. Sort of figured thus your interest in the session. Yeah. Do you have, I'm always sort of curious about this, about whether audience differentiates between Hope Summer Repertory Theater and the academic theater during the school year. Do you have a sense that those are different groups? Anybody like, nope, I haven't really ever thought about that before. Yeah. So the difference is, right, that during the school year, September to May, the performers that you see on stage, the design work that you see on stage, all of the technicians that are working on those things are Hope College students, faculty, and staff. Yeah. During Hope Summer Repertory Theater, which operates essentially like an independent company, independent from, with oversight from the college and sort of budgets provided by the college, but it operates sort of on its own and with some partnership with the theater department, but more autonomy. They hire and bring in directors, designers, technicians, actors, stage managers from all across the country who are working professionals, who are current students, who are current graduate students, who are anywhere in between. And so we have everywhere from interns and apprentices to well-established, long working professionals. So yeah, they are slightly different. But as an audience member, it probably in many ways doesn't necessarily feel like they are. And that's a good thing, because that means that we're putting on good work. If you came in January and saw a show and went, "Ooh, that was really bad," and then came in June and said, "That was really good," then we'd say that our student work wasn't quite where we'd like it to be. But there is something to that. There are performances where, yeah, maybe this performance isn't 100% what we'd like a professional to be, but that's because we're training students. Are we striving for excellence always? Yes. Do we know that sometimes there's still room to grow? Yeah, of course. That's true even as a working professional as well. So yeah, so if you've seen things with Hope Summer Rep, they're usually in thrust, almost always, because it gives us a lot more space upstage, meaning at the back of the space, for us to put store things for other shows, because especially with Hope Summer Rep, it's a repertory season, so they are switching things between performances multiple nights of the season. By the way, I just used the word upstage there. If I use terminology or lingo that you're like, what does that even mean, Eric? I didn't track that. Raise your hand. Let me know. I'll try. I try to do a good job of explaining that stuff. I teach an intro to theater class, so I'm pretty used to like simplifying language and then explaining language that I inherently end up using. But I'm totally open to being called out when I've not done it well. So any questions about that first section, or we'll keep sort of going through the balcony a little bit? So far, so good. All right. Okay, resuming in the balcony. So we have back here, as I use my fancy camera here. I borrowed a fancy camera like mount from the library that allows you to get really smooth. So it's sort of like a handy cam, like that you've seen on film work. And in some ways, it was great. And in some ways, it was more trouble than it was worth. Halfway through this, I stopped using it. We'll see if the image is more choppy. Hopefully, it's not bad. All right, continuing. This is our sound mixing station. So, if you've ever seen a booth at a theater before, where you find your stage manager, a light board operator, and maybe a sound person, you may have not thought about why is there sometimes another space that is exposed for a sound person. This space, sometimes called a sound island, that's actually my favorite term for it, depending on where you see a show. This sound position is sometimes on the main floor, sometimes it's in the balcony, sometimes it can be any number of places. But the important so let's turn that into a question and answer. So you have technicians that sit in a booth, and they may even have a sound operator who sits in a booth. We'll talk about them in a little bit. But this sound operator who is sitting at this position out in the middle of the audience, again, I like to call it the sound island. They're in the sea of seats, and they're the island of sound in the middle of the sea of seats. Why would they need to be out in the audience? Exactly. Yeah. If I'm in a booth, the answer was you can hear what the audience is hearing. That's exactly right. If I'm in a booth with glass around me so that I can talk on headset to people backstage saying, "Oh no, the scene change is going poorly. Hurry up," whatever I need to be saying, behind glass, I might have a monitor. I might have like a sound. The sound from the space is being pumped into that space so that I can hear it, but I'm not hearing what the audience is hearing. I need to be out there with you so that I can actually mix that sound appropriately to hear what you're hearing in the moment. Yeah, this is why sometimes it makes sense for them to be on the main level. Sometimes it's the balcony, but depending on where what makes the most sense in terms of layout of the space and where they can try to get the best experience of what the audience is hearing. If you've ever been to Dimnit Chapel for worship service or even for Vespers, there is a audio mixing station that is in the middle of the congregation, and they try to be pretty unobtrusive there, but they are just an island of tech in the midst of worship, and they're there so that they are hearing what you hear. In that space, actually, the lighting designer is also seated in that same spot, so it can vary depending on the type of space you're in. So yeah, very good. And now virtual me will continue describing the same thing. Here is that this is not behind glass or anything. This is not an enclosed space. This is out exposed to hear what the audience hears, because if this person is mixing all of our sound mics and things, all the reinforcement that's happening, this person needs to be able to hear what you're hearing. So by having this position out in the open, that's what you find there. So that person can see the stage well from here. So they can see as people make entrances and exits, or if there's any sort of problems on stage, or somebody's on stage and their mic isn't working. But really, the main thing they're focused on is their actual work here. Just briefly take a look at the soundboard here. I'm not going to turn this on. That's a full lesson for another day. But you can see here that this is a soundboard. We've also got a place over here for the technician to have a script open so they can be following along. And then potentially if they needed to run some sound effects from up here via CD or something like that, they could, though that's not the way we do things typically anymore. This is sort of a holdover from the old days, or if we wanted to play some like pre-show music or something like that. And even still, that's rare that we would run it through a CD player at this point. But this is actually a really lovely place to watch a show. In this space in particular, I think the balcony is a great place to watch shows. Occasionally, you get some sightline issues in the balcony. Oops, sorry, as my camera operator there freaks out. Occasionally you get some sightline issues when things are staged very far downstage, but that's typically not the case. It works out rather well. I think the balcony is a great place to see shows here at DeWitt. Before I fire that back up, any questions about any of that? Yeah, absolutely.
I've heard that producing sound in DeWitt is somewhat problematic. There are, I don't know what the suggested ways are to improve, but you probably do. Do you have any comment on that?
So the question was that there you've heard that there are challenges to producing sound in DeWitt, and that there's opportunities to improve that. So there's a few different things there that could be what you're hearing about. One is that specifically where those thrust seats are, where the orchestra seats, when the orchestra seats are spun out to that thrust configuration on the two sides, the two walls behind those two areas are directly parallel to each other. That is strange and not advised in a theater, because when sound bounces off of a wall and it reaches a sound wave bouncing off the other wall, they can actually cancel each other out. It's a fascinating thing, and would be a fun thing to diagram if we wanted to spend the next half hour doing it. But essentially, by having two walls that are perfectly parallel, that causes a little bit of acoustic challenges. But that's specifically in the thrust configuration. When we're in that a proscenium, where we swivel those back to center, and those sort of sound baffling cork panels get moved in, they break up that problem, so that isn't so much of an issue. But that is one thing that you might be referring to. The other challenge is just that it's a slightly older space, and some of the technology that exists to sort of route sound where we need it. Most of the time works just fine, but every once in a while you got some challenges. But yeah, does that answer your question sufficiently? Yeah, absolutely. Great. Another question. Yeah, question was, are all of our student shows mic'd, and is that because of the acoustics? So until recently, no. Recently, yes, but let me explain why and how and what ways. So typically we mic everybody for musicals, because it's just with the orchestra and or however large your musical accompaniment might be, being able to balance things with mics is just a lot very helpful. There is a school of thought, or there has been a school of thought for a long time, for plays that do not have that musical accompaniment the way a musical does, that we should try to not mic our actors. Specifically, it's good training for them. We're trying to train professional actors who should be able to project and be heard in the back of the room. I'd like to think that you'd all be able to hear me without this mic in this room, as both a trained actor and also a college professor has to talk to rooms this size on a regular basis. But for our online audience, and also we are talking a lot about accessibility in the theater world right now, not just in the classroom, but in theater performance. So one of the things that we've been seeing more and more in the industry is miking actors, but then not pumping that audio into the speakers, pumping it into a hearing assist system. During last school year, the 2020-2021 school year, we did not have any in-person audiences at all, but we had fully online performances. And so for online streaming, we mic'd every actor, even for all of our straight plays that were not musicals, because then we knew we were going to get good quality of sound into the system for the folks at home. That has been actually a really wonderful stepping stone to what we've been doing this year. This year, we're still all mic'd 100% on campus, just as you are here. Again, thank you for that. And knowing that we are, again, working oftentimes with young actors, right, who have less experience, less training. We're working on that. That's why they're in school. And they're wearing a mic, or they're wearing a mask, excuse me. That's an additional impediment So we've been miking any actor wearing a mask, we've been miking still, even just for the room. The one exception is the show that's happening right now that opens, today's Thursday, opens tomorrow. Native Gardens opens tomorrow in the Studio Theater. We're actually going to see the set a little bit later on our tour. I'm the sound designer on that project. And we are not individually miking all of our actors because it's a small space. It's no bigger than this section of this classroom. So it's a very intimate space. So everyone should be able to hear those actors. However, accessibility is important. So we have one mic that is set in such a place and is a type of mic that has a large pickup area. So it's designed to pick up the audio of the full room, and then that pumps into our hearing assist system. So if somebody is having trouble hearing or anticipates that they might have trouble hearing, they have that option. Is it a perfect solution? Not quite. I wish it was a little bit better. The biggest problem with it, I was actually testing. I listened to most of the show through that last night, watching the performance. The thing that I think is the most sort of finicky about it, that I wish was a little bit better, is that that mic is designed to pick up the sound of anything in the room, and one of the things it picks up is the sound of the room. It picks up even in this room, you can hear that just gentle hiss of air and heat and whatever, and air intake, and the mic picks that up. If it were a more advanced system that we were using, we could potentially equalize EQ to sort of take out some of those wavelengths of sound. You do this in your car when you're listening to music and I'm having trouble hearing the voices, and I'm going to turn up the mid range. I'm going to turn down the high end and the bass. Or somebody's in the car and there's some classic rock on. You're like, I'm going to turn up that bass because let's go. Yeah, that's equalization. That's EQ. So if we had the ability to do a more advanced version of that for that hearing assist system, I think it would help us. But that's what we're currently using. So generally, we typically in the past have not mic'd everybody. We've moved towards miking more and more, but not necessarily pumping it through the speakers, because we want to try and train them to not need that, but we want to make us accessible to our audiences. Yeah, does that answer? Yeah, question.
I found that if I don't sit in a position watching the play where I can see their mouths,
Yes.
I have a harder time hearing. Now, does that make sense?
It absolutely makes sense. So the question was, finding that if you're seated in a place where you can't see the actors' mouths moving very well, you have a harder time understanding them. This is a thing I think a lot of people have learned in the last 2 years, just how much we all read each other's lips all the time, subconsciously. It's not like I'm a trained lip reader, I'm James Bond. No, that's not the point. It's that as human beings, part of the way that we connect with one another is we look at each other, and part of the way that we hear and understand each other is we look at each other's mouths. We watch the way someone's lips move. We watch the shapes that their mouth makes, and that helps us understand them. I think that's particularly true with somebody who has an accent, or somebody, because they're making the same shapes that your mouth makes, but maybe there's something internal with their tongue or whatever that's making a different noise, and so you're having trouble understanding it. We've given ourselves a big challenge. We've given ourselves an additional obstacle to help with that understanding by wearing these. But on another level, I think that we've also learned just how expressive our eyes are. That's a different thing, side to this. I think it's actually lovely that even in a room this size, this far away from some of you, I can tell when you smile at me. Yeah, like that like what a wonderful thing it is to know that just with this part of your face, I know that you are enjoying this, or I know that you're following, or I know that question didn't make sense and I need to repeat it. Right? So even as we've learned how much we miss this, I think we've learned how much we appreciate this. But yes, in terms of performance, that can be something that you want to think about in terms of where you want to sit when you see a show. Is I know that I do better if I can see their actual mouth move. The Broadway tour of Hamilton is in Grand Rapids right now. My wife and I went last week and saw it. It was great, and we were seated as close as I could afford in the in the mezzanine, the first balcony. And I know that musical real well, so I didn't necessarily need to see their mouths move, but I was close enough, you know, I was far away, but I was close enough that I could see. And actually, even though my contacts are a little out of date, my eyes are still pretty good. It's part of my job. So I was able to see their mouths move and connect with them on that level. But that's a very real concern that you have to sort of think about as you're trying to figure out where you're going to sit. But you're not strange. That's a very normal thing because we all do it subconsciously all the time. Yeah, very, very normal. We'll continue on here. This is a view that's much more familiar to you as an audience member. This is our lobby. From our lobby, going into the main theater here, this set of doors takes us out on stage here. Now, this is obviously just the same space we were in, just from another perspective. The main thing I wanted to do here is actually, before we get too much further, is look back over our shoulder here at this booth. So we'll call this the tech booth. The tech booth is where the rest of our sound and light and stage management staff are stationed during a show. This is a space that's always a little bit in a state of disarray, hopefully not terribly most of the time. I'm just turning on some lights a little bit brighter here. So we often keep it rather dim in here so that it's not distracting, but just bright enough that we can be able to see out and be able to see our work here. So I mentioned before that sometimes you have a sound person in here. This is a station where our sound operator sometimes sits. If that sound operator doesn't have to hear the direct mix of what's happening on stage, this person's just hitting sound effects, like we need to have the sound of a phone ringing or a car starting. This person can run sound effects from here. We'll still hear them in here. Notice the monitors on either side. This space is equipped with monitors so that the stage manager and all technicians in here can hear what's happening on stage, but it may not be sort of exactly the same audio experience as what's happening in the space. This is why that operator needs to be upstairs. Our stage manager typically sits here. Again, my camera's doing a little wacky stuff here. Like I said, stage manager typically sits here at center. They have the ability to speak over this mic to people backstage or to the entire space. If they need to make an announcement to the audience about some sort of issue, they could do that. Additionally, they have the ability via headset, via this system here, to speak to anybody who's on headset, whether that be the lighting and sound technicians, the stage management, assistant stage managers backstage, wardrobe, anything that they might need to do. And then this is our lighting console. So the light board operator sits here. They would program the show here during technical rehearsals, and then they would be present during shows. During shows, the main thing they're going to do is just hit this button here, labeled Go. That's going to be the main thing they'll hit during shows. We'll talk a little bit about that in the classroom at the moment, and by session 3, we'll be talking about lighting in a little bit more depth. But for now, you can know that this is where the stage manager typically works with the stage manager at center, lighting over here, sound over on the other side there, all looking out at our stage out there. So, I mentioned that the light board operator during a performance just hits go, and that is because technology is great and has changed lighting a lot in the last, say, 60 years. So there's a time in history when the way you would set light cues is you would have an individual fader, and these actual faders didn't used to just be little tiny knobs on a board. They used to be a dimmer that was a big handle. And so you can find some cool archival photos of folks with set the levels of all of these different handles all across a rather large room that would also be very warm. Because essentially what you're doing is you're taking some of the electricity away from what's going to the light, and the rest of that electricity has to go someplace, and it becomes heat. And so this is a very warm space. You might have many operators working together to make all of these different levers do what they needed to do. And what you could do is you actually had 2 rows of these. You had one at the top that was all of these levers, and then one at the bottom that was all these levers. And you could set the current look up here. And then while that look is on stage, set the levers for the next look, and then wait for the call. Ready, stand by, go. Boom, and everything switches to the other setting. Now that light is on stage. Now we can set the next look. Stand by, ready, go. Boom, and set the other, and then we can go back and forth. A very aerobic way to set lighting. Now we do it with a little clickety clacks of buttons. It's much simpler. This gave way to just small faders, but the same principle, right? Set all of our faders here, shift, set all of our faders here, shift. But now on a console like that, a light board like that, we can record essentially you program it's essentially a form of computer programming. Actually, that light board, inside it in a way that like the average user can't ever get to is just a Windows computer. It's just the exact same Windows PC that you might have at home, with just specific software on it. So using that software, you can say, I want these lights at this level, and these lights at this level, and these lights at this level, record Q1. Then I want these at this level, these at this level, these at this level, record Q2. And then set a time. I want it to take 3 seconds to fade from Q1 to Q2. Great. Next, I want a blackout. All the lights, 0. Record Q3. I want that to happen immediately. Time 0. And then set the next one, and then set the next one, and then set the next one. And then when you've set 150 or 300 or 1,000 of those cues, depending on what kind of show you're working on and how long it is, they're all just recorded in the light board. And so then during the performance, the light board operator sits with their one finger ready to hit go. And whatever cue they're in currently, when they hit go, we go to the next cue. So the lighting designer doesn't actually have to come to the show after it's up and running. A lot of times when I design freelance away from campus, I'm not even in attendance at opening night because I have to get home. I have places to be. I got a kid to take care of. I got a wife to help so that she doesn't get mad at me that I've abandoned her and the child. So I need to get back to my life. So I don't even necessarily stay for opening night, because once the cues are recorded and the director's happy and I'm happy and I think it looks good, I can get out of there, and they just wait for the stage manager to say go, and then they go. I mentioned the stage manager. The stage manager is a position that is so important to the theater. But if you've never worked backstage at the theater, you might not even have a sense of who they are or what they do. Stage manager is one of the first people involved in a production, working closely with the director from the very beginning. They take notes on production meetings, which we'll talk about next session, but it's how we sort of make decisions about how we're going to approach a performance. Takes all of those notes. They are the information conduit between designers and directors and actors. In a rehearsal room, they are the actor's advocate. They can, if the actor has a problem with anything in the room, anything as simple as like, the room is cold, the room is warm, but also things like the director is rude. Like anything like that, the stage manager is a huge part of getting those things addressed. The stage manager also organizes things like, let's schedule you for costume fittings or for costume measurements. Let's schedule the next production meeting. Let's find out when are we going to have designers visit rehearsal to share with the cast what it is that we've been working on. When are we going to have tech rehearsal start? All these different parts of the process. Stage manager is in charge of all of that organization. And then once the show is up and running, they have what's called a prompt book, where every single cue that needs to happen, anytime an actor needs to come on stage that they can't hear themselves, anytime that a sound cue needs to happen, any time that a light cue needs to happen, anytime that a scenery piece needs to be moved and not run somebody over, the stage manager has all of that in their prompt book, and they are on headset, and they give a standby, and they might give many standbys at one moment. They might say standby lights 1 through 3, sound 2 through 7, scenery and actor stage left. And back on headset, the lighting would say lights, which is saying, I heard you. They don't say, instead of everybody just saying standing by, standing by, standing by, standing by, because then you don't know who said what. And you also don't know who you missed, right? So instead they say lights, sound, set, actor. And so then the stage manager knows that they've got confirmation that everything's going to happen. And then they would start calling their cues. Lights, go, sound, go, actor, go, scenery, go, lights, go, sound, go. So it can be a little hairy, but it's a lot of fun. It's a big job, but it's a lot of fun. All right, continuing on.
And here's our view from stage. Well, from what would be the thrust stage. Looking back out over our audience here at the moment, you can see that as a performer here, you have to make sure that you're playing to all sides of the audience, engaging with folks no matter where they might be sitting. Just to review where we've been, we started in the balcony up here, went up to the sound island, went down here, came in the front door, and went into the tech booth there. One thing to note, again, we'll talk a little bit more about this when we talk about lighting specifically during the third session, but when we get to a point of rehearsals called technical rehearsals, and we can talk a little bit more about this in the room in just a moment when I pause this, we typically set up tech tables where our sound and lighting designers can be, rather than being closed away in a small room someplace, can be out here in the audience so that we can communicate better with the director. So we set up those tables sort of in this main bank of seats, and then we're easily able to interact with anybody we might need in the space. One thing to point out here, again,
We'll pause that for a moment. I mentioned that I would pause, so here I am pausing. I mentioned this term a moment ago as well, tech rehearsals. This is when we add lights, sound, projections, if we have that, and eventually dress rehearsals is when we add costumes. At some theater companies, tech rehearsals include costumes, and we don't have a separate tech versus dress rehearsal. Depends on the theater company. That term of tech rehearsal is, you have all of these weeks of rehearsal that are actors and directors in a room by themselves, essentially, with stage management, figuring out their blocking. Where are they going to stand? How are they going to get there? How are they going to connect with another actor? How are we going to make that moment significant? How are we going to tell that story? Meanwhile, the sound and lighting technicians and designers the designer is coming up with, where are we going to put all those lights? How are we going to get them there? How's the set going to be built from the scenic designer? What's it going to look like? And then executing all of that. So they hang all of the lights, they build the set, the sound folks put speakers someplace, they hide speakers inside scenery, they do whatever it is they need to do. And then we get to tech rehearsals, where we slam it all together. And that has a moment of being a little messy, but ultimately, I think it's the most fun, because it's also where I get to see whether my weeks of planning was good. If I've done a bad job, then that first tech rehearsal is rough. Usually isn't. It's usually just fine. But if I've done my planning well, then that first tech rehearsal is exciting, because you get to start see it all come together. I'm always nervous on the first day of tech, because even though I know I've done a good job, I know that light's going to look right the way it was. I aimed it and everything. I know it's going to be good. Until we write that first cue, until I record that first light cue in the board, I don't really know that it's going to be okay. So I'm always excited and nervous. It's fun. But those tech rehearsals, again, rather than being locked back in the booth back there, we set tech tables out. We just call them, they're just tables, but they're designed to fit between the seats. So we can put a couple of different tables throughout the space, so that I can sit there with my assistant and with a light board operator. We can communicate easily. We can also be on headset. We can talk to the stage manager. The stage manager can actually turn and say something to us. The director can come over and say, hi, why does it look like that? It looks bad. And I can say, yeah, it's not done, sorry. Or they can say, that looks really good. And I can say, oh, well, it wasn't done, but maybe it is now. So that's what tech rehearsals are.
A lighting designer and sound designer as well, but lighting designer by passion and trade. This position that has lights hanging on it from the balcony, this is called a balcony rail. In some theaters, there's actually, the lights are just hung on the railing of the balcony. But in this space, that's not the case. This is a rail that is specifically installed for lighting equipment. Balcony rails are often a little bit awkward to get to. So there's always kind of a bit of a trick to get to them, but you can see these in a lot of different spaces. No matter where you go to the theater, if there's a balcony, you'll probably find a balcony rail, and you can sort of keep an eye out for those. And you'll find those in a variety of positions. As we talk about lighting positions briefly, there's a few different positions that you can look for in DeWitt, specifically when you come to the theater and see some different, them used differently during different productions. There is a pipe, vertical pipe here. Sometimes we call that the house boom in this space. A boom is a vertical lighting position, vertical pipe that we hang lights off of. And we call it the house boom because it's out in the house. The house is where the audience sits. We have a mirror position of the same on the opposite side. We also have this area up here. Trying to get the light to be a little less problematic here. There we are. That position up there is called a light ladder. Notice that it sort of looks like a ladder, but with lights hanging off of it. This is in this space we call this the alcove. These two spaces that are on either side of the stage, immediately next to the proscenium. We call this space the alcove. Notice, here's the thing that's kind of interesting. The stage right alcove over here doesn't go anywhere. So if you have somebody exit out that way, they have to come back that way. There's nowhere for them to go. That's not the case on this side. On this side, if folks exit out this side, they have the ability to get to backstage. But that's always something that our scenic designers and that our directors have to take into consideration when they're deciding how we're going to use this space. One other thing to point out, over here on the opposite side, so we mentioned, come on camera, let's focus, there we go. We have the alcove here. We also have this lighting position here. We call that the cove, not to be confused with the alcove. Alcove, cove. The cove positions, we have the same on the opposite side behind me as well. Cove positions are underneath the catwalks. You can actually see the catwalks up above here, and we'll actually go up there as part of our tour. But the coves are just...
Turns out I lied. We don't actually go to the catwalks as part of the tour because I ran out of time. But maybe I'll bring a video of the catwalks next time because this is fun.
Just a lower position on either side. They give a different angle to stage, and it can be very effective. So the positions we've covered out here in the front that you can look for in other spaces as well. Balcony rail, house boom, alcove with a light ladder, and a cove. And again, some of that terminology changes depending on what space you're in. Sometimes people will refer to side slots as a thing that this space doesn't have, but would function very similar to a house boom. And we can talk a little bit more about those things in the classroom. Very good.
I don't think there's anything I need to desperately discuss there unless anybody has any questions. Very good.
Has the cove lighting been there for a long time?
Question was, has the cove lighting been there for a long time? I think since the building was constructed. We sometimes don't use it as much. It depends on really what it is. So because it is just about 8 feet below where the side light positions are from the catwalks. So if the catwalks are here, those coves are just below. That difference in height can be really significant in some situations and can be really negligible in others, depending on sort of specifically what the intent is with what you want out of a light. But specifically when you see shows in the thrust at DeWitt, you'll see those used a lot, just because that change in height is significant, especially in that thrust configuration. So yeah, very good.
Okay. Before I go much further, I do want to mention that we've got some lights that are flickering upstage here. You'll see those as we continue here. I apologize for that. I'm not sure what their issue is. Got to do some troubleshooting. Now they seem to be working just fine, so I'm not sure what the problem was a moment ago. We'll see if they continue to happen. If they do, I apologize for any inconvenience that might cause. So one thing to point out here is this area here that's roped off. This is our orchestra lift. This orchestra lift could be used for various things. We store the sort of, there we see those flashes. We store the guardrails and ropes sort of in one of the alcoves. But the reason that this is all roped off is that we don't just use this to put an orchestra in. We could use this to make an orchestra pit. Yeah. So we could sink this down 6 feet or so and have it be a space between the audience in a proscenium configuration and the stage with orchestra in a lower position beneath them. This isn't the best orchestra pit. It's rather narrow. Usually if you find an orchestra pit underneath a stage, that space not only is just lower here, but also goes underneath the stage. The way this space is configured, it's not really intended to do that. But what we use this space for a lot is we use this for transportation. I'll show you in a moment when we go downstairs sort of what we use the space underneath the stage for. It's a lot of storage. It's where we store a lot of scenery and lighting equipment. And in that process of getting up and down from there, rather than trying to take everything up the stairs, an elevator is helpful. This is a great elevator. This can sink down the 20 feet or so to the space beneath the stage. We can load things up onto it, and then we can pull them back onto here and bring this up. One of the things that is interesting, because this is meant to move, when it is in its up position, I'm going to shake my feet a little bit, you can hear it rattles around a little bit. There's nothing wrong with that. It works just fine. But it's a little disconcerting, and it's distracting noise. So typically when we have a show that is in the proscenium configuration with or thrust, and this is in its up position, and we want it to stay in its up position, and we aren't going to need to use it as an elevator for a little while, we will bring professional elevator technicians in to lock it into place. When they lock it into place, we can't use it for transportation anymore. It just has to be in its up position. But while it is in its up position, it no longer moves around, and so it doesn't make that rattle noise, which would be very distracting during a show. Again, my apologies for the flashing lights up here. So let's go on to stage a little bit. I'm going to unclip here. You can see it's a little dusty in here at the moment. There's also these pieces of turf on the moment. I am filming this in early February as we are getting ready for production of Native Gardens, which is in the studio theater. And so there are these bits of grass floor here that we actually used for the production of The Wolves in the fall and are now using to be a backyard in Native Gardens. Again, my apologies for the flashing light. I hope that that is not a problem for anybody. Here we are on stage. I mentioned it's a little dusty here at the moment. This turf comes with a lot of built-in grit to it, which is great for people using it as like a soccer field. It's not great for us in the theater, just because we can't move it around terribly easily, and it's very messy. So all this dust around here has to do with that. So, backstage, the wings are the space stage left and stage right, where you exit to as an actor. Those wing spaces in this theater are relatively small. They're especially small stage right. If you've ever been to the Knickerbocker Theater in downtown that is also owned by Hope, the wing space there is even smaller stage right. You come off stage and you're basically right into what we call the fly rail, which is this equipment here that allows us to fly equipment in and out. We'll touch on that in a little bit more detail in just a moment. Whereas over on this side, we have a little bit more space to play with, a little bit more space to put scenery and things like this. This space is well designed in that our scene shop is just the other side of this door. This whole section here is a giant door. It's like a little pocket door. It opens this way, and then you can get into our scene shop. The same is true back here. This whole space, again, from this top area here down to here and over here, is all one big pocket door. It all slides to one side, and that gets you into our scene shop. So if we have large scenery pieces that are under construction, or if they need to be stored someplace, they can be worked on in there and then transferred directly out here, which is a nice convenience to have. There are many theater companies that they have to build their sets sort of in their shop space, usually across town from their performance venue, and then get transported back here to the main space, and you'd be able to get onto a truck and fit through a doorway and things like this. One thing that I should point out is this light here. This is a ghost light. And let's actually talk about that together in the room.
So, a ghost light. Has anybody heard the term a ghost light? Yeah, a couple folks. Yeah, a few folks. So a ghost light has two purposes. One, extremely practical and real, and one, superstitious. And your mileage may vary on how real it is. The superstitious one is that the ghost light keeps the ghosts away, or keeps the ghosts happy, depending on your interpretation. Many superstitions exist in the theater world, and many theaters, essentially all theaters, have some sort of rumor or rumbling that it's haunted or that there's ghosts. And that either is because there's definitely ghosts there. Again, your mileage may vary, or it is because it's a big building, and when you're in there by yourself or with only one other person, and like a heater does a thing, or there's a click or a pop, or there's a little rattle someplace, it sounds like there's something otherworldly. And there might be, I don't know, but probably not. So there's almost always a rumor of a ghost. The Knickerbocker Theater, just right next door here, owned by Hope, is supposed to be haunted. I have never experienced anything that would make me think that, except that there is the true story. This is not rumor. This is actually real. So that building the Nick was constructed and completed in 1910, I believe. And the gentleman who was like the main worker on it, and then was going to be the main manager of it, like a week before it opened, he was working on the marquee out front, like putting up the sign that said whoever's going to come first, and he fell off of his scaffolding and he died after having worked several years to build the building. So if there is a ghost, it's him for sure. But but in my mind, I've not experienced anything that would make me think that. That said, the other reason is a very practical, safety-related one. You can go back to essentially when all of your lights in your theater were flame, your ghost light acted as your pilot light. You can turn off all the other lights, but we can keep one light on, one flame, so that we have something that we can light everything else with. In the modern day, we don't need that. This is, although that's a fun story about why did a lot of theaters burn down? Well, because we used to light them with fire. We don't do that anymore. We burn fewer theaters down now. But the practical reason now is a safety one. When you leave a theater, you almost every theater space that you leave will have a light that is left on at all times. It's usually a ghost light like this that can be moved around and unplugged and put away, but it can also be set in the middle of the room. A good example as to why you might want that ghost light actually is this orchestra lift here. Yes, there's railings around that, and we are extremely diligent about using those railings. If that lift is down, those railings are up. We do not move that lift to its low position without those railings. However, If it was down just the 6 inches to the tile in front of it, we won't put the railings up for that. That's a step, that's not a hole. But if let's say you were working in the scene shop during the day in the morning, and last you knew the orchestra lift was up, and then you go for a break or you go to lunch, and then we work the rest of the day and we lower that thing even just those 6 inches. And you come in and then we leave and we shut off all the lights and there's no ghost light. And you come back in just to grab that sweater that you left in the front row. You know where it is. You've been in this theater a million times. You don't need to turn on the light. You're very comfortable and confident. This is the same thing we all do at night when we try to get to the restroom because we know our houses very well. And then you still slam your foot into the ottoman. This is that, except that it's not slamming your foot in the ottoman. It's falling and potentially hurting yourself significantly. Although you could hurt yourself on the ottoman as well. So to avoid that, we always have a ghost light on. So the ghost light is there to either keep the ghosts away or to keep everybody in the room safe. Very good.
Okay, it is now several days later. I was in tech rehearsal for a show. We'll talk a little bit more about what that means in class, especially next week. But I wanted to tell you that now we're going to show you the room again. It's going to look slightly different because there's been a lot of changes. What has happened since I was in here last is they have hung the lights for the upcoming dance concert. So we'll see those a little bit. We won't see them on, but you'll be able to see a sort of a change in here, and that it's a kind of slightly different arrangement. There's less stuff on the ground. So, as indicated, there's less stuff lying around here. It's still pretty dusty from the thing that we were talking about before. Up above, you can now see that there are lights hung for the dance concert. These cables that are hanging down, we can talk about those a little bit in class. Those are from drop boxes, and we'll talk a little bit about that. I am going to fly in one of these sets of lights. So over here, this is the fly system, and I'll probably do a little diagram of this in class, assuming we've got time. But right now, I'm going to see if I can do this in such a way that you guys can still see this while I work. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold the two of these so that they can't move, and then I'm going to undo this brake here, and then I will pull the onstage rope, this one here, the one that is closer to stage, and the lights will come in. So let's take a look at that. For safety, I always announce what I'm doing, even if nobody else is in the room. First electric coming in downstage. And there we have them. The one other thing to point out,
I edited out a bit there because it was a little bit too much busyness, and I knew that we were going to be run short on time because we're having too much fun. So to talk just a little bit about that fly system. So that fly system is what we call counterweight fly system. And the way that works is essentially, if you have two things, you have the pipe that all the lights are hanging on. A pipe that doesn't have lights on it is just called a batten. That batten, if we give power to it so we could plug lights into it, we call it an electric. So if I've got an electric, and then on the other side, so we have pulleys that go up and over, and then they attach to a thing that's called an arbor. And it sort of looks like a metal frame. And on that metal frame, we load metal weights onto it. Sort of like the weights you would use at the gym, but rather than round, they're rectangular. And we know how much those weights weigh, and we know how much each of the pieces of lighting equipment or scenery or curtains that weigh that we're going to put onto the batten. And what we try to do is we want it to be evenly weighted. We want this to weigh as much as this does. And then what happens is when this goes up, when the arbor goes up, the batten comes down. and vice versa. When this is in weight, even when it's not locked, it will balance and not try to run, which is what it does when it is out of weight, where it will. That is potentially extremely dangerous because in the worst case scenario, if you had this, let's say you had far too much weight on your batten and not enough weight on your arbor, this could go flying this way, and this goes up. And if it's going extremely fast, worst case scenario, you could have bricks when they get to the top come off of the arbor. Now you have steel bricks falling from the sky. You also have an arbor that now is potentially that you could have something fall off of this and be out of weight the other way. You could have things fly any number of ways, potentially very bad. The reality is that if you operate this correctly, it's extremely safe. Here's why. Here's how we operate it correctly. When it's even in its weight distribution, if I need to hang things on this, I need to put more lights on, bring the batten all the way up, the arbor, or the batten all the way down, arbor's all the way up. If I put more weight on this, it's all the way down already. There's nowhere for it to go, yeah? The batten is already at its lowest place. If you put more weight on it, that's fine. To put weight onto the arbor that's up above, there is a ladder that is in the back corner of the space. You climb up this very tall ladder, about 40 feet, and then with a partner, you load bricks onto this arbor. It's hard work. If you've ever held a 20-pound weight in front of you versus holding a 20-pound weight out here, it's different. I experience this in the kitchen when I've got like a bucket of pasta and if I've got to dump it out like that, oh boy, that's so much harder. Yeah, you have to keep it close, but not so close that you burn yourself. So it's this type of work that you do up there. So then you load until it is an even distribution of weight, so that this matches this, and now this moves just fine. It's the taking weight off that, again, we have to do in the same order. Batten comes all the way down, arbor goes all the way up. Take the weight off here first, and then take the weight off here. This is where you can end up with problems the other direction. So it's very safe, but it takes good planning. And the most important thing it takes is communication. The people on the floor communicating with the people up on the load rail, the weight floor up above. That communication needs to be extremely clear. Which brings me to one of my other favorite superstitions from theater. Notice this is all a bunch of pulleys and ropes and things. If you were a theater company in the, let's say, 1700s that had just developed some of the earlier versions of this technology, who might you hire that is good at ropes and pulleys and tall things and ladders and shimmying up places and things like this? 1800s. Who's good with ropes and pulleys and tying knots and things? Circus? What was that? Circus is sailors. Sailors are exactly the people that you would use for a pulley and a rope and a thing and a climb and a whatever. The sailors are exactly who you hired to have run all of your rigging. Because again, same term from sailing, rigging in sailing, rigging in theater. Those people, those existing riggers, they already had that knowledge. Let's take that same knowledge and let's apply it here. Sailors communicated by whistling. So the type of whistle and that would have these calls that would go back and forth. This led to the superstition that it is bad luck to whistle in a theater, because in the early days, it was a safety concern. If you walk in the theater going, they might be like, oh, scenery coming in? You got it, man, no problem. And in this comes flying and it crushes your lead actress, and now you've got a real problem. So instead, the rule was don't whistle in a theater. It's bad luck to whistle in a theater. Just like breaking a mirror is 7 years bad luck. Why is that? Well, because mirrors are sharp. It's very bad. Don't break them. It's just so it's bad luck to whistle in a theater because it could cause, in the early days, it could have caused something extremely dangerous. Now, I whistle in theaters all the time. I don't think about it, but it's every once in a while you'll hear somebody that'll say, "Don't whistle in a theater" because of that very thing. Yes, question.
Hopefully you don't
Mm-hmm.
many times during one season.
Yeah. The question was essentially how often do you have to do this type of load-in? The answer is basically once a show. So you load in, meaning take all of your scenery and lights and set and everything and put it into the space. And at the end of the process, you strike, you take it all away. And so ostensibly, unless you have to make changes mid-process, which inevitably does happen, but you don't have to do as much. The other thing that'll happen is you load everything, you get it all even, and then a week later, the person who was running it felt like it was even enough in weight, and then said, you know, if there was an extra brick on this, this would probably be easier. And then you sort of have to rock, paper, scissors for who wants to climb 40 feet of ladder to go take care of it, because it's just kind of a pain in the butt. It's not hard, it's just sort of annoying. So we're at time, which means that we'll transfer the rest of this dialogue to our next session and sort of abbreviate that. That's part of the reason I wanted to do 3, because I knew that we'd get excited about stuff and there'd be things that we'd be curious about. Yeah, real quick, just because I know it is end of time and I want to be conscious of that, but I do want to give you the opportunity for any last questions. Yeah, very good. Yes.
Just a quick comment. It took me down memory lane because I began doing high school theater in 1971. And on stage right, we had a giant box with a big lever. And in the next room, we had all the resilient plugs that plug things into.
Yeah.
And it was always a pain. We always did it. And I did it for a couple of decades, I think. But I completely forgotten it after we got what they were doing.
Yeah, just to repeat for folks that are online, it was a nice story from being running lights with that same dimmer system, and also a mention of a bunch of wires that need to be plugged in what we would call a patch bay or patch panel from back when we used to hard patch things. If you're trying to imagine that, imagine a telephone operator. Please hold, I'll connect you. Ka-chunk, ka-chunk. Please hold, I'll connect you. Think about that, but for all the lights in a theater. So if I need power here, here, and here, but I don't need power here, here, and here, I can take power from here and connect it to here. That's what we call hard patching. We now do a similar thing all digitally, and we call it soft patching. Although at this point, a lot of times you just call it patching because you don't have to do as much delineation anymore. But yeah, any other questions? Very good. I hope you all have enjoyed this. I'm looking forward to our next session because I'm having a blast. So we'll see you next week. Very good. Thank you folks online for joining us.